Welcome, everyone. I'm Angelo Robles to Angelo Robles' Effective Family Office podcast, where I look to distill the best practices and best ideas of the world's most successful families and their family offices. I hope to provide thought-provoking opinions and feature amazing thought leaders to our listeners of the podcast and viewers with an eye towards the future of the family office. Today's podcast is titled Philanthropy During COVID-19. We have three very special guests with us today. Matthew Past, who's a family office, an investor, and a philanthropist. We have Gavin Mooney, the founder, Changing Our World. And last but certainly not least, Carolyn Brennan of the Catholic Relief Services. Thank you all for being on the show today.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, Angel.
Well, thank you. The pleasure is all mine. We have much to discuss. And as I noted, we're not going to be sequential for 20 or so minutes each. We're going to bounce around a lot because you each bring such a different perspective, and the audience is going to learn all about that. And I can't emphasize enough. I'm going to go a little bit on a mini tangent for about 30 to 60 seconds. I've been doing this a long time. I know thousands of substantial $100 million plus families. When I'm asked what makes them successful after the first generation, the answer is always engagement with the legacy, the history, the culture, the values of that family transcending on down through the generations. Yeah, mitigating taxes, for sure important. Asset protection, estate planning, investments, all of that is important. What gets overlooked is what I just said. The vast majority of families will not last, no matter how much money they have, generation after generation after generation. And it's because of those reasons that I noted. Well, how does that play into philanthropy? Philanthropy means I'm giving my money away. You're supporting the values that you believe in. That's an inner sense of purpose and value that you're providing back in your neighborhood, your community, your country, or if applicable, more broadly. And your children, your grandchildren, your heirs that see that and see your sense of purpose and mission. And then they may have a different purpose and mission than you, but they realize the importance of that. There's a lot of education that occurs with philanthropy, and with the wealthiest families, it starts very early, and all the reasons and the things that I noted. So philanthropy is the anchor tied with teaching and helping to coordinate the values within a family. And without philanthropy and giving back to the community, the numbers would be even worse than they are. So philanthropy serves an incredibly important and unfortunately overlooked aspect of generational success in families. And those are probably things that Matthew and Gavin will touch on directly and indirectly as well. But on that note, let me get off of my little high horse about the incredible importance of philanthropy and what an amazing teaching vehicle and tool it is for those with the resources, and jump right into a question first with Carolyn. You are with the Catholic Relief Services, and you're seeing some of the most pressing humanitarian emergencies around the world. Where have you been most recently? And I know you've been a global traveler with CRS, and what is the greatest concern right now?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I most recently have been traveling. I spent most of February in the country of Bangladesh, in the southern part of the country, where it is now hosting the world's largest refugee settlements. Nearly 700,000 refugees from Myanmar fled to Bangladesh in late 2017, seeking refuge from harm. And what is so difficult about their situation, apart from having to flee, is just the topography of where they live. They fled to a cyclone-prone country right on the Bay of Bengal. And guess what? We are heading right into cyclone season. Many of them live on steep hillsides where there are landslides and incredibly challenging conditions, which leads to one of our greatest concerns right now as an agency globally, not only in Bangladesh, but around the world, which is the impact of the COVID pandemic for communities that are already vulnerable. In so many of the countries where we work, communities are living with very fragile health systems with already limited access to clean water. And the impact of COVID in communities that are already at risk. Maybe they are living in a refugee settlement like in Bangladesh, where if you don't have a home, how do you stay at home to quarantine? Or if you have no space for privacy or to keep distance, it makes the risks especially high. And even though we were all facing the same virus around the world, the way in which we can fight it is quite different from where we live. Here in the US, we're fortunate to have a hospital-based response. But for many of the communities where Catholic Relief Services works, there aren't hospital structures, and people might live a 2 or 3 hour walk from the nearest health clinic, which is staffed by health volunteers, not even doctors. And so our concerns globally are the impact of the pandemic on communities that were already high risk before this even started, where this is not only a public health crisis for them, but has the impact to massively disrupt their lives and potentially change the trajectory of their lives if they don't have the support to withstand this moment in time.
Yeah, I'm going to have to follow up with you on that because I think you made some important points there. Here in the U.S., again, we have advancements in our healthcare, and we're having challenges with COVID-19 in areas of the world where the doctor, the hospital systems is not as strong. It's more complex relative to social distancing. They're not quarantining or shutting down businesses, and that's a whole other complex issue. But the sad part about COVID-19 is it's impacting people, older people that have so much experience and values to pass on that we could learn from. And unfortunately, those that may have a compromised immune system or have some health challenges. So the most compromised of the most compromised are the ones that are being most impacted. And certainly that pulls, I think, at all of our heartstrings. What are some of the things that you're seeing with some of the philanthropic money going into some of these more challenged communities that is making an impact? It's keeping one additional person alive that has so much to bring with COVID. If you could tell us the story.
I mean, what is amazing is that just how much a little goes a long way. First, just information. We just getting information out to communities that might be illiterate, who might not have materials they can read. And I spent a lot of time in Afghanistan, and for the women there, they say just not being able to read is like being blind. They don't know what sign they're reading. They don't know if they're getting a fair deal or a fair shot. And so being able to get information about how COVID is spread in these communities and how they can get help, and that trust with communities is so important. We saw this in the Ebola crisis in West Africa in 2015, and how critical trusting relationships are, and being able to convey information and to have the trust of communities to believe what is true and to prevent the risk to themselves. And just last week, a colleague of ours was describing how in South Sudan, where the risks of COVID have been spreading and people unfortunately have perished to the disease, they are having to have conversations with communities and families about safe burial practices. And this is such a sacred thing, as you can imagine, for any family to bury their loved ones. But to have the relationships with communities, to be able to sit down with families and to have that established trust, to be able to share with them how they can safely bury their loved one, their grandfather, their daughter, their sister or husband, and to do so safely so that further members of their family are not affected is a critical role and service we can play by being present in a safe way with communities. We are also working with our local health institutions and local health partners. These are missionary order sisters, local health facilities that are literally at the front lines. And not only are they responding to the crisis, we're supporting with a variety of technical support, equipment, training virtually. Now so much is of course done virtually as we are experiencing in our own lives, but providing support virtually where we can't safely be with people. But that support is not only for training on how to safely care for patients with COVID or to care for patients in a COVID at-risk setting, but it's also providing counseling and trauma support for those frontline service providers, which we are hearing is of need because of the effects, the emotional effects that many of the nurses and frontline staff are experiencing in responding.
That's an incredibly passion plea and some of the things that you're seeing on the front lines, that you're actively traveling to these parts of the world that are even more challenged. And, to some degree, you believe in this so much, you're putting yourself at probably some level of additional risk in a variety of ways that you don't need to be in, and that many people from CRS don't need to be in, but they believe in a higher purpose than sometimes just their own comfort and security at that given moment. And like I did hint at earlier, probably nothing is more valuable than having that sense of purpose. So it's great that you have that, and hopefully certainly others will learn from viewing or listening in today. We'll switch over to Gavin. Gavin, to help give a little bit of context, because I think what you do is very intriguing and kind of ties in how I open things up about the importance of family, of values, and philanthropy. Can you provide an overview of what you do as founder of Changing the World and your great work?
Yeah, absolutely, Angelo. And I won't lay claim to being founder. My founder might have a problem with that, but I am president and chief client officer. I'm proud to be in that position. So we've been 21 years in existence, and we help private family foundations, nonprofits, and corporations do more good. It's as simple as that, Angelo. We help with operationalizing, doing strategy, and raising billions of dollars on an annual basis for great causes like CRS. The nonprofit sector, I think some people fail to realize how large it actually is, Angelo. 1.3 million nonprofits in the United States, 10% of the workforce, close to 13 million people, and $2 trillion in spend on an annual basis. So it's not insignificant. It's bigger than the transportation and construction industry. It's one of the largest industries out there. So we work with nonprofits to affect change and to impact programming and impact lives. That is our role. That is our function. And that's what we do day in and day out.
And in the light of COVID-19, what has been the impact on your clients? How have they, a couple of questions, how have they adapted? How has the philanthropic community responded?
Yeah. So I'll start with the unfortunate piece, which is just the economic conditions and the impact it has had on the many philanthropies that are out there. So as I said previously, close to 13 million jobs. Well, in the last 5 months, 1.6 million people have lost their jobs in the nonprofit sector. And that is obviously has had a massive impact, not only on their individual lives, but if you think about it in society more broadly, because of what they do day in and day out. As you said, they do their work because they have a higher purpose and they care. So that is, just dramatic, and hopefully things will bounce back in the not so distant future. When I think about our own clients and each of the sectors that operate within the nonprofit space, I mean, there isn't a listener that hasn't been touched by a nonprofit, whether it's the hospital, the credit union, your alma mater in terms of your higher ed. You name it, we've all been impacted and touched and by a nonprofit at some stage, and will continue to be that way for the rest of our lives. But when you look at sector specific, the dramatic impact that COVID has had. So let's look at, as an example, healthcare and hospitals. So just think about your local hospital and what it has had to go through as it relates to both preparing and executing against COVID. And so that means basically retrofitting a hospital where you have new departments, where you have redeployment of your employees, where you have elective surgeries, which are the major funder, obviously, for many hospitals, come to a complete standstill. So the AHA, the American Hospital Association, has estimated that hospitals are losing about $50 billion per month, Angelo, as a result of this crisis. Now, that's compounded by, okay, now what do we do? We've pivoted one way. Now, if you're in Massachusetts, you're in Connecticut, New Jersey, New York, things have started to improve. Now you've got to pivot back and change back, but always with the mindset that COVID is going to be with us for the foreseeable future. Similar vein in the education sector, Angelo, you look at what has happened overnight in March. Most of the major universities and education institutions shut down and went to remote learning. The investment in technology, the training of the faculty. Think about tuition and the impact on tuition and enrollment in some of the major higher ed, some of the public universities, and some of the secondary and elementary schools that are going to be impacted in the upcoming year. Rutgers is a great example. A public university system, 71,000 students. They lost 70 million as it relates to having to refund students for unused campus services. You compound that with the 60 million resulting from canceled surgical procedures. You know, the total sum of loss to Rutgers is $183 million in the education space. So just really profound. And the same goes for faith-based organizations. If people aren't in the pews, they're not receiving funds. And so a dramatic effect, up to 60% of loss of earnings for many faith-based organizations. And by the way, of the $450 billion that Americans give on an annual basis, 30% of that goes to religious organizations. So again, the compounding effect of COVID will be with us for a long window of time. Let me talk to the silver linings. Never before have we seen a rally from both individual, foundation, donor advised funds, family foundations than we've seen from COVID. Since May, or looking at the results up to May, we've seen in excess of $10 billion that has been donated to nonprofit causes. That far exceeds what happened after 9/11, after the Great Depression in 2008, after Hurricane Katrina, and obviously that's May, and that is going to continue to happen. So we're, you know, the philanthropic community has had a dramatic response. It has resolved. It is investing in nonprofit organizations because it sees that it is a resilience. There is a resiliency there, and they need the nonprofit sector to, I won't say thrive, because there's going to be a lot of pain and hurt for a long window of time, but certainly sustain during these moments in time. Angel.
Very excellent points, and also delivered again with passion. So it's great to see people with such purpose. Matthew Past, how are you?
Good, Angela. How are you doing? Thanks for having me.
I'm doing good. So kind of how I open things up are things that you could certainly relate to, multifaceted, being a generational family member of success as well. Could you talk a little bit about how the virtues of purpose and philanthropy were kind of instilled or a part of you since you were a young age, and like, how did that happen? We'd love to hear it.
Well, what we've seen in our office is a gradual process of, okay, the entrepreneurial effort taking place initially and being very successful, and a lot of celebration and some philanthropy. Then in the culture, the anchor that you mentioned becomes more and more apparent as the crucial element to maintaining a culture of productivity, actually, and retention of employees. What I've seen is that as we've given more and more, and as we've had a community website, a BTS in the community, our family office in the community, we've seen employees getting involved in going out and volunteering as a group, you know, hopping in a van with other people in the company and going out and volunteering and getting a lot out of that. So as we've gone along there, they've also responded quite well to the high impact efforts of the principals. So when principals give to a big organization like CRS or UNICEF, they really see that the type of people they're working for is, you know, really good people, and they get inspired to do more and more. So we're seeing internally in the family, we're seeing really the glue that holds everything together is philanthropy. It holds the culture together, and it holds the organization together. It attracts and retains very intelligent people to work for us.
You bring up some really good points. Some of them I didn't even really think of. So yes, you are correct. Those that are inside a family office, knowing that they work for an incredibly wealthy family, you want to have a level of respect, and you want to be, to some degree, aligned with the family, because it's usually an intimate environment that you're working at. Knowing that a family has been fortunate and worked hard to have the successes they have, them giving back to their community and maybe more on a larger global level is important. But what could those families do to help their executives and their people in general in their family office, perhaps you could argue as an executive benefit or employee benefit, you know, making matching dollar contributions to the employee's interest in philanthropy? That would be one way. Giving people time off. Now, the world has changed with COVID being so remote, so it's a little different than being all in an office environment. So that dynamic has changed. What could families do to have their executives, their employees feel more engaged giving back locally as well as on a larger level?
Well, I think it starts by example. I was invited to a graduation up in Lowell recently, and it was a graduation of teens finishing a program called Bridging the Gap. So we had, this was done by the Salvation Army, so we had the regional director there, the major, and we had a couple of other Salvation Army people. The Attorney General came in. She said, "Okay, everybody makes mistakes. You kids should really, go forward and thrive and with positive energy." And then I came up and I talked a little bit about, I think I said something about, I was on an economics course or seminar in New York, and it was after the Great Recession when unemployment was very high and things didn't look good. And the economists came in and said, "Look, nobody's buying anything. It looks like deflation. We've had a small rally here in '09, but things are only going to get worse. But there's one thing that people are buying, and that's technology." So I donated some computers, and everybody in the company got involved in that personally. And the kids then, after COVID, used those computers,
Huh.
So we saw an example on that was one opportunity to make an example, and then another opportunity was for the people to get involved. And I can't tell you how happy the IT department was to organize these computers for the kids, and the letters we received from the children saying, "Thank you, this came in the nick of time because of COVID, and now I'm online." And so that's impact. So local impact is really important, and making an example like that, I think, is crucial.
Yeah, I mean, I could think of a significant single-family office family I visited in Silicon Valley last year, where that founding principal, still relatively young, had certain core values and interests to them, including in the investing part of it, what would be defined as impact investing. And the people that worked there were incredibly also aligned. It was not a necessity or a mandate. It just tended to draw the kind of people in that were attracted to what the principal believed in their core values. And for sure, they were backing it up with their money, both in philanthropic endeavors and investing, even if it meant short-term taking a hit on their returns, but their values were important to them. And to have that tie-in with the executives and employees could be very, very powerful. Carolyn, switching back to you. So for so many of us here in the US, humanitarian crisis can seem overwhelming, maybe even impossible for one person or even a foundation to make a difference. Can you share what you've seen in terms of the impact of philanthropy in an emergency context? Examples would be, since you're quite the global traveler, Syrian refugee crisis, the typhoon in Philippines. I mean, you've seen so much.
Oh, I appreciate you asking that. And I definitely understand the sense of overwhelm or fatigue, even when some of these crises can seem so large or intractable. You can think, how can I make a difference, or my family foundation? I'm here to tell you that you do. And I have been privileged to see it up close. A lot of the people that we are supporting are just going through a situation that was well beyond their control. An earthquake uproots their world. A conflict forces them to flee just to protect their families. And when you are in a moment like that, and you are somewhere perhaps where the language is different, or you don't know, you're disoriented, or you just want to connect, there's no telecommunications, but you just want to know if your family members have made it too. All of those things, and you're protecting your children or the people you love the most in your world, you just want to keep them close. In that moment, when you are able to be offered protection from the elements, even if it's a tarp, to have something overhead between you and the rain, to have some privacy, to grieve if you need to grieve, to collect yourself, to have a hot meal to feed your children, to have information to know where you can get help, where you can go, what is available to you. If you've ever been in a situation where you have needed help, or you've known someone who's needed help and someone has helped you, you know how impactful that is. It is not insignificant. In fact, it is life-changing in those moments. And nobody wants to be in a moment like that. Nobody wants to need to receive help like that. Is as humbling as it gets. And people just in that moment are so quick to get through it. And once they get through it, they are able to recover. We are a very resilient species. And I'm constantly amazed by the humanity that is seen and the strength of humanity that takes place in these backdrops that you think are unimaginable. And yet people rise up, and getting that assistance from near, locally, or from afar is a game changer. One, to know that you can make it through that night. People who might be going through something tonight around the world who receive help, to know that you can get through it in that dark moment, but also just to know in the bigger picture, you're not alone. People know you are there. And we all know our sense of family. We all have the same human emotions and needs, no matter how privileged or adverse our lives have been. We love, we felt loss, we felt triumph, we felt humility in whatever form we have. It might be more severe in Syria than perhaps here in Chicago, but we've experienced things on a human level that we all know and can relate to. And so for families in dire need, in that moment when you just need to care for and protect the ones you love, just to get through, to have that assistance come, it is very significant and powerful and game-changing. And I have seen it. People pay it forward. It is quite impactful on the ground level. And I often feel, just in your discussions, Matt, and you, Angela, talking about the impact of family philanthropy, I often feel that in the field level, be it in Lebanon or in Iraq or in Afghanistan or wherever, Haiti, I'm just at the end of a trail of generosity and compassion that is built and cultivated in families and communities and cities around the world. It is all a continuum. You know, we all play our own part, and it is important, it's significant, it makes a difference. No matter how massive that context or crisis might be, it is changing, and in some cases saving a life. I'm telling you, it is life-changing.
And it kind of popped in my head. I remember a significant family member telling me, now, sure, we're utilizing philanthropy and giving because it's the right thing to do and to teach certain values and principles that I noted. And we started to allocate certain funds that younger family members could pick. Okay, I'm going to put 5,000 here or 10,000 there, but they took it to another level. They wanted the younger people to know what it's like to kind of get your hands dirty in the trenches. It was almost too easy because we're a rich family to give 5, 10, or 25,000. I don't want to force you to do it. I want to talk to you about the value of doing it and encourage you to proactively want to make that decision to be more hands-on. And one of the lessons that they noticed with a specific family member, and this was a very, very rich family, was basically they were kind of unhappy and moody. And the opportunity to be hands-on in the trenches and noticing that often finances and money had little to do with happiness, especially in different parts of the world, actually improved everything about that person. It seems like, does CRS encourage families, besides with their capital, but with their with their children, with their grandchildren, with the family members, to get out there and be interactive in the process?
I mean, when there is opportunity, it's incredible privilege, and we're all changed by what we're exposed to. And I think people would be really surprised by what they would encounter. You know, we might see in the news a certain image of places in need, and it can almost seem like a singular narrative. But so many communities, you know, people are, one, resilient, they're innovative, they're strong. And what I have found in my travels, but also accompanying family foundation members to the field, which is an incredible experience. But what you see is largely not physical. There is a physical condition and environment that's very different from where we might live. But what stuns me still, even though I'm in this work, is, you know, in my job, I'm often meeting people in their worst moment, when something horrible has happened and everything's been stripped away. Maybe they're home, maybe family members. But what they are holding on to is their sense of self and identity and
Yes.
character, and that you cannot strip away. And how people show that to you, if you are visiting, if you have the opportunity with your family members, it's really remarkable. I was in Lebanon meeting with a Syrian refugee woman. Her name is Zahaya, and she was from a middle-class family in Syria. And I met her just after she had crossed the border into Lebanon. Everything was destroyed for her at home. And she was in a tent. She didn't even have anything in her tent yet. And I was sitting with her. We were both on the ground. And I could see she was still stuck between these two worlds. She was literally reaching in the air for what wasn't there, like a tray of tea, because she kept wanting to offer me something. Hospitality is a defining cultural trait in the Arab world, and certainly for Syrians, you don't have a guest without offering something. And she kept apologizing. And Angelo, the first word I learned in Arabic was humiliation, because she kept saying, I'm so humiliated, I can't give you anything. And of course, I'm telling her, I don't expect anything. Please, I'm not here for that. I just want to hear your story. And she was just so embarrassed, because this madness swirling around her didn't represent who she was. But as we left her tent, after an hour and a half conversation, we were leaving and we walked out in a brown desert. We're just in the Bekaa Valley of Lebanon. There was this little yellow flower, like a weed of a flower, but off to the right in the ground. It was the only spot of color. And she saw it out of the corner of her eye. And she literally reached down and she plucked it out of the ground and she gave it to me because she had something to give. And she said, please take this flower. You came here to my home. You asked me my name. Please don't forget my name. Please don't forget us. And these are the encounters you experience that just rise above the condition, the reason you're there. You just come face to face with humanity at its finest, even if the reasons are so difficult for why you are meeting. It's a constant restoration in your belief, at least for me, in humanity and the human condition. And I highly encourage any family to consider travel. It can be very life-changing for your family, but also just the experience of it. It's unforgettable.
That's a great story, and certainly one that's very touching. You mentioned one word a minute or two ago that stuck with me, and that was the word character. That's another thing that we've written, spoken about, and that I hear from families. You could be rich financially and horrifically poor in areas like spiritual, like character. And if you are, again, assured you're not going to get personal happiness and enjoyment out of your capital, it could be fleeting. In the moment, you may enjoy it, but from a longer term perspective, and for sure, if you do not have character, maybe the number one trait of generational successful families succeeding is they instill a sense of character in their rising generation growing up. And they don't just talk about it, they do it in their actions and the interactions they have with the younger generations in the family, both internal and external to family. We could do a whole show in Will, and the person who's great at that, his name is Fred Nazem, could give an eloquent discussion on the value of character in the family. I do have an audience member sent in what I think is a really intriguing question specifically for you, Carolyn, so I'm going to read it. We have a couple of live attendees on the line. He notes, my family has been a longtime contributor to CRS. What are CRS's needs from a time and talent perspective right now? How can we roll up our sleeves and help CRS?
First of all, thank you for supporting the efforts and communities we serve around the world. We're so grateful, and really thank you so much. Right now, I think the flexibility is what is among the greatest needs, because so much has changed in this context. We've experienced it in our lives, having to work differently, communicate, connect differently. Well, humanitarian operations are having to shift in this COVID context, because humanitarian work is largely social. We meet in large groups, people come together for a distribution or a class or a training. That can't happen the way it did 4 months ago, 5 months ago. So everything is having to be adapted to the environment to ensure that any assistance is safe, but also to incorporate COVID protection measures and things of that nature. So the flexibility and innovation required at this moment is where we are at as an agency, really innovating in real time, being agile to the situation, flexible to the reality there, where certain milestones might have been established back in November for this fiscal year. They're going to be adjusted now because of the reality in this context. So I think the engagement, the understanding about the nuance of right now, how everything's a little bit different, and how we have to adjust to be safe, but still effective and still help people who are urgent need, that's critical. And I think, honestly, at any given time, just staying connected. You know, we as an agency, we really look at our relationships as a relationship, not transactional. So we love to communicate, hear from you, communicate back, be transparent about what is happening and hear your concerns and questions and to answer them and be responsive. So never hesitate to reach out if you have any questions just about what's happening in the world, whether or not you're involved even with CRS or in that project. We'd love to share information just for that greater awareness and just to have a connection and relationship. We really see it as a two-way street and hopefully what is a long-term relationship.
Well, thank you. That's very helpful. We'll switch over to Gavin. How does a typical successful family, their family office, decide on what organizations that the family will support?
Thanks, Angelo. And Caroline, your stories are incredible. I know they're not stories, they're real truths, and you're just an amazing person for doing what you do. Just put it in the context, Angelo, of where we started. You talked about generational philanthropy and those families that are most successful in terms of your clientele and passing down sort of assets to the next generation, the character, the goals, objectives. And so I put it in the context of what's going to happen in the next 25 years as it pertains to philanthropy, as it pertains to assets. Let's start with assets. So 60 trillion in wealth will change hands from one generation to the next in the next 25 years. And when we think about philanthropy, you know, the top 1% of wealthiest families make up 99% of philanthropy in this country. And that's astounding. And so actually, another fact, if you think of ultra high net worth individuals, and for us in our field, we classify those of assets in excess of $30 million, only 36% of those are actually giving to philanthropy. So I would say to anybody, get involved. The world needs you. Let's just start there. But I think it all boils down to the family's own interests and inclination, you know, their experiences in life. Maybe it's healthcare research. Maybe it's some of the things that Caroline just talked about overseas. Maybe it's education. I think the first thing is to get involved and understand what the organization does. And Caroline's done a beautiful job of articulating the great work of CRS today. Look at their website, you know, ask friends of, focus in a particular geography or a particular sector. I mean, there's no shortage, Angelo, of opportunities in terms of the 1.3 million nonprofits that are out there. So I think it's what's closest to the organization. You know, Caroline mentioned though, many of the organizations that we work with, whether it's the C-suite of the boards, you know, they're passing on the baton to the next generation of family members. And we think that's, you know, an extraordinary opportunity from an education perspective, from an exposure perspective, to really get the children of those individuals that have been stalwarts of philanthropy for decades, to get them involved early and often and exposed to the things like CRS is doing. And so, you know, hands-on, being involved, getting involved in a board, I think is a great way to do that. And then, as Caroline said, and we've done this with many of our clients, going to see the work firsthand. There's nothing like doing a sleep out in California, like we've done for the Covenant House, which is the largest homeless shelter for 18 to 21-year-olds across the nation. There's nothing like, you know, a C-suite person going in and experiencing that. It's for C-suite to sleep out is experiencing that firsthand, what these children literally go through. And we could go on and on with obviously anecdotes, but I think getting tangibly involved and seeing it real time just is so empowering and powerful for individuals.
Yeah, that's fantastic and very well said. Matthew, When mixing the community-based philanthropic efforts and participation in high-impact philanthropy, such as disaster relief, is there value added?
Yeah, I think that, from the family office point of view or family's point of view, there's both are important. I talked about, the community effort and being involved in local efforts to help people. And I think that's extremely important. On terms of like high impact, I define that as, okay, there's a disaster, and there's an earthquake in Haiti, and then you see this tremendous response. And I think a lot of families say, well, that's great. I'll give $10,000 or $100,000 to, care or something like that in that context. A lot of people do that. But in order to like feel and experience that, a group like CRS will come into your office and say, okay, what would you like to do? What would you like to do in order to make an impact? In the case of CRS, they came in and they brought a lady that had a Princeton degree. She had learned Arabic and went to Princeton, and CRS recruited her, and she was in Iraq. And basically, okay, she was taking a pool of money and she was interviewing people. Okay, she was interviewing a hairdresser who had lost her shop and still had a clientele but had no money. So once she vetted that person and determined, okay, we are going to invest in, we're going to help you here, then that person was benefited. So in that situation, this is a good example because CRS had the resources to come in to my office in that case and say, this is what you can do. You can help this lady and her team over there in Iraq, help reestablish small companies. You can have that impact and we'll give you updates, So I think that as far as high impact goes, I think that it's very important to make an effort in that way and get involved in that way. If you can't go out to the field, like if you join a board, you're going to be invited to go on a field trip. That's very impactful. That can change your life in a lot of ways, even if you're in a midlife period of time. But you can also have know what you're investing in and know where your money's going and follow that trail of money and see the impact. So impact makes a tremendous effect on a family at all levels. People say, well, let's make an impact. And although a big organization has government funding, every dollar that you put in or every $100 that you put in is going to meet a need. So I would say that you have to do both. You have to do something local. I think that's very important because your family members are probably more able to do something local and get involved. But with a little bit of effort, you can get involved also in high impact activities that everybody is usually passionate about at some point. And one more point on
Yes.
on your earlier point on character and behaviors. And I'll give an example again. My son went to BC for 2 years before he went to Brown, and I attended a dinner, and we broke up into groups. And my table, we were trying to figure out. It was all about supporting a new chair at BC based on a formative education. So they were getting a lot of phone calls from elite schools saying, how come all of your students hold better in terms of happiness and being happy in life and all that? And so they were trying to codify it, not so much from an Ignatian point of view, but what were they really teaching and why were these people having lower suicide rates and all this, less problems? And a purpose-driven life is an essential facet of many ethic systems, right? Some sort of purpose, and there's a duty and obligation to help people that are suffering. So it's not to be secularize this, but to make that point, we were certainly out to support that effort, and you could see what's happening along those lines.
And, the value of legacy planning broadly in my work with family offices, the incredible importance it engages with in values and a value statement, a vision statement, and really an important one, probably more so even for philanthropic initiatives and engagements, a mission statement. If you could talk a little bit about the value of that and why it all ties in.
Well, a mission statement, I think, is I see a lot of people, like I said before, we have employees that are with us 15, 20 years, which is rare. And they have idiosyncratic value. They've built up a knowledge of the company, and we don't want to lose them. And in our mission statement, I think that, service is key, but foremost, in marketing concepts, the client is central to everybody in the different departments. That's a basic teaching in business. You put the client first, and you're serving that client. You're giving that client an experience. And our mission statement is to, broaden that out by example, as I've said. But a mission statement can be, obviously, you don't want to get too wordy in a mission statement, but you can broaden that out to serve suffering humanity. If you wanted to, you can do anything you want with your mission statement. And it does have an impact. These words are powerful. Suffering humanity is out there, and then you have your family office in the community, your family office in the world. So all of this is a glue, as we've said, and it's an anchor, and it inculcates value. So when people are putting in 12-hour days, they're doing it against a very positive environment, which has productivity. It's not like, we have to go work for these jerks, all these people that aren't engaged in the community. And not that people think like that. I mean, they say those are private issues in many, many cases. Every family is different. Family offices are like snowflakes, right? We're all different. And, we're not necessarily going to broadcast what we're doing either. But, in a subtle way and in a powerful way, you can make efforts to do what we're trying to do here, to make impact.
And Gavin, what are some tips you would provide to be a good giver, a good funder during this current environment?
I think for starters, and Caroline said it, flexibility. So many of these nonprofits' worlds have been turned upside down, like most of us. Our worlds have been turned upside down, but their world has been turned upside down. So they're trying to do a lot more with a lot less. And so I think in terms of expectations, if you're a funder providing funding to a nonprofit, maybe sort of streamline your expectations as it relates to the usual, in-depth reporting that you might expect in this moment in time. Just give the nonprofit the opportunity to actually execute against programmatic work and services versus having to do the administrative piece for now while this is going on. I think that, and as evidenced by what we're seeing from many of the major foundations and funders, whether it be donor advised funds, the Fidelity donor advised funds, people are compounding their giving and accelerating their giving. So there's been a 20% increase year over year with the DAFs through Fidelity to the tune of $2.6 billion. And so we would suggest that people should really accelerate their giving. Now is the time to support your nonprofits. I'd also add to that, Angelo, that now is the time to stick with the nonprofits that you've always supported, but while also simultaneously supporting those that maybe you're interested in because of the pandemic. Those families, and you referenced it, and Carolyn referenced it, and I think it was Mark who suggested how they could help more with CRS. Be there for those nonprofits that you've always supported. Pick up the phone and check in with them. They certainly will do it with you, no doubt, if they've got a good fundraising program. So I think just being there, being a listening ear, and afford the opportunity to offer your expertise like Matthew and Mark has just done there. I think that's really key and really helpful and really invigorating for the leadership in these nonprofits. We had this acute phase of this pandemic where there were so many decisions that had to be made in a short window of time in order for these organizations to survive. And I think the expertise now, the C-suite expertise, the value of people like Matthew and other leaders, business leaders now to these nonprofits is tremendous. So lean in and be there for them.
And I suppose this question could be for you, but certainly anyone could jump in. And again, this comes from my experiences in the world of quote unquote great wealth or riches. For sure, financial wealth and riches is important for many. And if nothing else, it gives you optionality and you could help others. So for sure, it's valuable. But riches are defined much deeper than your financial wealth. It's your spiritual, your emotional, your intellectual. How would And maybe Gavin, when you're working with the family that is maybe newer to wanting to be more active in philanthropy, how do you help to show them that it's more than just a tax benefit and a short-term perception of value that you're providing? Do you tie it into the greater sense of riches?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of ways that, and you know, the work that I just case in point, because Carolyn's here, the work that CRS does, if you demonstrate the impact and showcase the difference you're making, it's going to be powerful to anybody. And I think that gets you over the sort of business mindset of it. You know, it really is about impacting humanity and making a difference in the world. And that's what we're all about in the philanthropy sector. And that's what I know many of your audience members are about when they invest. It's an investment in people. It's an investment in humanity. You know, philanthropy's been around a long time. And many of the most debilitating diseases, whether it be neurological, whether it be oncology, whatever that is, if you look at just the healthcare space, we would not have made the improvements that we've made without the investment of philanthropists. And that's just one sector. We would not have, and Carolyn can speak more intelligently than I can to this, I'm sure, literacy levels that are reduced, or running water, or all those different things without the power of philanthropy. So to me, it's about telling the storytelling and demonstrating impact. And that's how we overcome the sort of the business sort of perspective or mindset to it. Carolyn, I don't know if you have anything to add on that.
No, I agree. Just being able to demonstrate impact and share it and show it is critical. I think I agree with everything you said.
And Carolyn, what would you say is unique to Catholic Relief Services in terms of its humanitarian work? What makes it different from other organizations might people be familiar with?
I think the three main things, and I think our peers would say this too. I think what stands out or is notable to CRS first is our business model. We work through and with local partners. We are largely locally led. So that means we are with and among communities, and more than 90% of our staff in any country are from that country. So if you go to Kenya to meet with CRS staff, they will likely be Kenyan from any part of the world. And we invest in that local talent. We believe that it's critical to invest in local social service structures, the local organizations that are on the ground to service their communities. And we work through these local partners. Primarily, it is our church partners in many countries, but also other local organizations. And what that allows us for is, one, not only a long-term presence and trust with communities, but the ability to shift and pivot when things and circumstances change. And just from an administrative perspective, if we are already working, as we are in the Philippines, doing a variety of programming, and a typhoon hits, we're able to go in and respond, perhaps as a different area of the country or a different island, without having to, one, be considered outsiders, or two, set up shop or new operations just from an admin cost overhead. We don't have that problem because we are already there. We already have this massive footprint, either through our own offices or through our local partners. So we really believe in local leadership, local empowerment, local engagement. That is very significant to our business model. Two, the second thing is our programming approach is holistic. It's comprehensive. So we don't just do water, or we don't just do emergencies or food assistance. We provide comprehensive, holistic support because that is how we live our lives. If you only shelter but don't have a job or clean water or have safety, you don't have much of an opportunity to have a safe life. So we really look at the comprehensive, holistic needs of a family and community and provide those range of services, from shelter to water to education for girls to whatever it might be, innovation for farmers. It's a comprehensive, holistic approach. We do not believe in doing only one thing in one place. We don't feel that that is actually sustainable or even relevant in today's world. And then the last thing I would mention is just part of our Catholic identity is really the emphasis on the dignity of the person, integral human development. And we are an agency founded in integral human development and the belief in the dignity of the individual. And our programming services anyone around the world who is in need. So we don't help a community because they are Catholic. We are in a community providing support because as an agency, we are Catholic. But that dignity of the individual is central to our programming. We never want that to be compromised, forgotten, overlooked. And so upholding that issue and element of the human condition, the dignity of the person is central in defining from every project design, from an early start of a program to its full recovery. That is central to our identity and to how we approach our programming.
And Carolyn, what do you think would surprise people here in the U.S. about humanitarian work or the communities that you assist?
I think people would be surprised at how innovative it is. We might picture distributions, things being handed from one community, one person, to another person. And that does, of course, is a part of humanitarian assistance, but it's very innovative. It has to be. I mean, look at our world today. Technology plays such a key role. And so, for example, providing support where we started in our conversation in Bangladesh, in the Rohingya refugee settlements that are on this topography that's cyclone prone, using GPS mapping to map the hazardous areas of those mountainsides to be able to create shelters that are wind resistant, earthquake resistant. In every place, a humanitarian response should be, we believe, localized to that context. How we support communities in Nepal, it should be different and look different than how we might support communities in Ghana. The materials that exist in the market are different. The local economy is different. The needs and topography is different. So we approach any response or type of programming in a very localized way. How can we build structures here that invest in the local economy? We don't want to bring things in from the outside if that will displace the local business owner. We want to utilize those local shop owners, those local seed providers, the local wood makers, and infuse them and their wisdom, talent, skill set, market into a response. And so there's a lot of innovation, a lot of technology that is underway that has to be a relevant, honestly, responder in today's society, but also to be localized. It shouldn't be a one-size-fits-all solution in any response. So I think people might be pleasantly surprised at the sophisticated nature that allows for greater efficiency, accountability, transparency, all of these elements that are really central to providing a high-quality, targeted, dignified response.
And Carolyn, for those that have an interest in learning more and helping to support Catholic Relief Services, how could they find out more? Who could they reach out to?
Oh, please, you can come to www.crs.org. ORG, or you can call 1-877-HELP-CRS, or we have a regional contact in your area. We'd love to hear from you. We are a communicative agency, so we're happy to share information, answer any questions, anytime. Please reach out. We'd love to share information with you and to hear from you.
Thank you. And Gavin, a similar question for you, for families still looking to discover their journey, to want help in sorting out the complexity of things. You could be a resource and an advisor to them. How could people learn more about your company?
We make it so easy, Angelo. We're called Changing Our World. So changingourworld.com is our website, or gmooney@changingourworld.com. Don't use the acronym though, COW. We don't like that as much,
I guess you won't be purchasing that URL.
No.
It's probably really expensive too, by the way.
True.
And Matthew, I know you're going to want to be selfless, but again, for everyone listening in, Matthew's an important resource and member at Family Office Association for many, many years, a wonderful gentleman, and really was the glue and the person that put this together and made me even further realize the importance of doing more in my online meetings, my podcasting, my video meetings, and reminding me of things that I've written about, the incredible importance of philanthropy and how it's important to spread to a wider audience. But if I give you the floor for a minute, whether it's talking a little bit about what you do or talking about Gavin and Carolyn and their wonderful organizations, I'll leave it to you to kind of wrap us up.
Well, since the conversation is about COVID and philanthropy, I was jogging down on the Cape, as we say in Massachusetts, down on the Cape, and I was thinking about the 1960s, and I thought about how President Kennedy said, "We will put a man on the moon in this decade," and I was also thinking about how inspired people were, and I thought, well, he also set up the Peace Corps. And I thought about Vietnam, and I thought about all the people that joined the Peace Corps and all the people that still join the Peace Corps. And I kind of segued that in my thoughts into CRS and what's going on with COVID today, and how meaningful and how much of a catalyst something negative can be. We've all suffered from COVID in different ways, perhaps directly. We've all seen the suffering. But it can be a catalyst for a lot of people. It doesn't have to be a doom and gloom, let's all get depressed. This can be something that inspires you to go and do something, and it can help your family and your family office.
Well, that's a great way to end it. Matthew Pass, thank you so much. Gavin, that's spelled Gavan Mooney, of Changing Our World, and Carolyn Brennan of the Catholic Relief Services. Thank you so much for making it an engaging, very important, and very timely meeting, as well as recording and all of that. Everyone, I'm Angelo Robles. I'm the host of Angelo Robles' Effective Family Office podcast on Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeart, and other platforms, and on YouTube, where we're more and more active with our videos and our meetings. It is simply Family Office. So we're very lucky to have a great and very simple name given who we are on YouTube. We encourage you to reach out, subscribe. It's easy. And I'm the founder and CEO at Family Office Association, a global membership organization dedicated to the interest of incredibly successful families and their family offices, providing a significant amount of original proprietary content, hosting global programming, and in today's COVID world, adapting to hosting more and more and more programs. They just happen to be digital, but we're incredibly active with them, and many other projects, master classes, and programs for our members and the benefits that they're receiving as a member. We hope you all enjoyed it. I could be reached. I'm active on all social media platforms. I mentioned already Family Office on YouTube, and the website is familyofficeassociation.com. Email angelo@familyofficeassociation.com. Carolyn, Gavin, and Matthew, thank you so much, and have a great day.